Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now on the line from Hong Kong is Elaine Yu. She's a reporter for the AFP based in Hong Kong. Elaine, thanks so much for being here. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So we're gonna we'll do some context setting. Actually, I will say for TMBS patrons this past Sunday, I had a very good conversation with Elaine where she helped do some real history and context setting for what's happening. But there's a lot of activity right now. So can you just tell us maybe what's happening at the airports from a movement perspective in terms of the uprising in Hong Kong? And what are the latest signals that the Chinese government is sending with regards to the protests?
Right. So chaos gripped Hong Kong's airport yesterday, on Tuesday, as pro-democracy protesters staged a very disruptive sit-in that paralyzed hundreds of flights, and police eventually had to fire pepper spray in the airport. And two men thought to be undercover cops for Chinese were also surrounded, and one was beaten as well. So the last day definitely sees the stakes being raised for the protests, and Beijing is also sending increasingly ominous signals that the unrest must end. And state-run media even showed videos of security forces gathering across the border. So you can really feel, it's the stakes are rising now.
And what those security forces are People's Liberation Army forces specifically?
They looked like military forces, but of course state-run media has their propaganda and their message that they want to show, and they have adopted a very hardline rhetoric. But of course it's a part of their propaganda. But now people are seeing tensions are running so high, and we are seeing unprecedented levels of chaos and some ugly scenes at the airport as well. So the last 2 days really at the airport has become a sort of turning point for the movement. And we're for the first time seeing real signs of splinter in the movement as well.
Are they still occupying the airport? And could you tell us what those splinters are? And then maybe more broadly, can you start explaining the different factions inside the sort of broader kind of like Hong Kong movement generally? Like, what are the forces that are aligned with labor and the left? What are the forces that are maybe more nationalist? That type of thing?
Right. I think the splinters right now, or the signs of divisions we're seeing, is very much focused on tactic and how to keep the movement going and how to escalate it. So to understand yesterday's scenes at the airport where two men thought to be undercovers were effectively detained and zip-tied. So to understand those scenes, there are two important developments that have happened. The first is that police have recently disguised themselves as activists to make arrests, and that has sent paranoia soaring among protesters. So they have dressed themselves in the signature black T-shirts, and they wore the gas masks with the pink filters that protesters have been wearing, and they started making arrests. So their sense of paranoia is really pronounced among protesters right now. And secondly, the second context is that a woman was severely injured in the eye. She was reportedly shot by police in the face by a beanbag round, and her eye was reportedly ruptured, and people were saying she could lose her vision. And that's why starting on Monday, you're seeing the airport completely occupied, and you're seeing the phrase "an eye for an eye" graffitied and scrawled all over the airport. And there are just imagery of, this bleeding eye everywhere. And it's really the center of anger for protesters. And police brutality has always been a theme at the protests, but yesterday, in the last 2 days, you really see it, shaping the movement in unprecedented ways. So emotions are running extremely high, and which led to yesterday or Tuesday in Hong Kong time, where two men were surrounded and tied at the airport. And one was turned out to be a journalist for the Chinese state-owned media Global Times. The editor-in-chief of the Global Times confirmed that one of the men were their reporters. And so what happened was that protesters said this man was taking close-up shots of them, and they were worried that he was a spy. So they surrounded him. He was tied, by plastic straps, and you could see, some cuts and bruises on him as well. And there was this sort of mob that surrounded him, and paramedics had to really fight their way in and, rescue this person and send him onto the ambulance. So yeah, these ugly confrontations are unprecedented as of yet, and the divisions are pertaining to, a lot of people online on a very popular forum where people have been discussing tactics are saying, it looks like we really made a mistake yesterday. We have to, set ground rules for this movement, and how come, what led to yesterday. We really have to have some internal feedback or ways to self-correct, essentially.
And so, yeah, and because that's interesting, because one of the other things that's been striking me about the protests is the incredible ingenuity of like occupying different areas, then kind of like moving out, going somewhere else when the authorities come. I've also read that even things that you might not think about but are really important logistically, like having prepaid Metro cards that are handed out to people so that there's speed of movement, but there's also, I just want to acknowledge we're playing some of this footage. It's very disturbing for people who are watching it as I talk over it. That there's the Metro cards, and that also when they're prepaid, that makes it, you can't track people's purchases in the same way, and obviously that makes it more difficult for the authorities to surveil. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.